and she will be talking about open source information spillage and mitigation. So thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Chris. All right, voice check. Here we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Hold on, there's a clicker. Here's a clicker. All right. My name is Caroline Bailey. Most people just call me Kat. This presentation is a collaboration between myself and Anthony Cotonio, who is unable to be here today. Anthony has worked in IT and information security for over 20 years. He's retired Air Force and now works as an information systems security manager for the Defense Logistics Agency under the Department of Defense. His expertise is in network infrastructure. Hold on one moment. There we go. His expertise is in network infrastructure, penetration testing, compliance, and systems hardening. And I, as Chris said, have over 20 years of experience in IT, security, and investigation. I formerly worked in aerospace, currently transitioning more fully over to information security. My expertise is in physical threat analysis, civilian counter-surveillance, and information gathering. So Anthony and I worked on this presentation together to highlight the importance of open source intelligence, OSINT, for domestic violence survivors. So here's the information we're going to review throughout this presentation. I'm going to introduce some common terminology to ensure we're all on the same page. And then we'll briefly review domestic violence and how OSINT relates to furthering abuse efforts. How OSINT can be used by abusers. I'll discuss open source intelligence vectors, and then I'm going to offer some case studies on how we produce OSINT, a pretty thorough discussion of image analysis and why spillage is a significant problem for individuals. And finally, I'm going to wrap it up by describing some personal OSINT mitigation techniques. So starting with the definitions. What is information security? Anyone? Yes. Yes, okay. It involves the protection of unauthorized access, misuse, modification, disclosure, use, and destruction of information. It also covers a fairly wide multitude of processes that we use to secure systems in our businesses and our work centers. Information security is a very broad field that encompasses numerous subdomains, such as forensics, compliance, risk management, many, many more. But for this briefing, we're only going to be discussing information security topics as they relate to personal security and OSINT. So, open source intelligence. It is the collection and analysis of publicly sourced information. Fancy words for something that's relatively simple. Y'all have done it every day, pretty sure. It can come from any number of resources like web searches, government data, publications, photographic analysis, anything you can imagine, more things like that. It's not just simple research. OSINT is the critical analysis of public information to produce verified, actionable knowledge about a very specific target. Actionable, now that suggests a specific goal by the adversary, not just searching for random tidbits about a person, but actually looking for the information for a purpose. For example, OSINT may describe a specific process to determine the target's routine, where they hang out, what time, when do they leave work, where do they jog, to further stalking attempts. Your goal is to stalk the victim. Thus, you'll seek information on their jogging routes, their favorite Friday night bar. Threat models. Threat models are the developed product from a hypothetical adversary's point of view. It describes your known vulnerabilities and desirable assets and potential avenues of attack to obtain those assets. Threat models are commonly employed by companies and government agencies, the ones that have significant assets worth protecting, like classified information, the IT infrastructure, trade secrets. They are developed with general questions. You start with a fairly broad range, and then they hone in on specific countermeasures as you develop more detailed answers. So later on in this briefing, we are going to offer a personal threat modeling framework as one of the mitigation techniques to assist those at risk of domestic violence. It's easier than you think. So, OPSEC, Operation Security. It was originally developed for military use. It has now expanded throughout multiple areas, such as IT and business. The process relies on assuming the role of the victim. What data is valuable to them? Is eavesdropping going to put operations in jeopardy? Can someone look over your shoulder at the airport when you're logged into work and pull secrets? Now, the entirety of OPSEC relies on offering useless information, or even disinformation, to disguise true intent while walling off anything of particular value. You've seen a magic show, right? The look over here at the pretty lady and the shiny things. While I shift a couple of things over here, presto. So in this case, we're going to be talking about arming the survivors of domestic violence with the tools they're going to need to get off the grid completely. And it can be done. And as a note, Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, is incredible. You really should read it sometime. It covers everything about strategy in combat, survival of massed forces, espionage, etc. The disturbing thing is it's applicable to this. And it's still read through the world on a military, through the world on a military basis as a fairly thought-provoking set of guidelines. Considering what you're about to see today, I do hope you'll take these lessons back and add them to your threat modeling to secure your personal information. So, mitigation. These are the various ways we mitigate risks in information security. Again, I'm only discussing information security as it relates to personal OSINT remediation and security. Each of these topics refers to risk: identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks to your personal information. Acceptance? Just as it suggests, some data is going to leak. You have to be prepared for that scenario. The trick is to realize minor pieces of information aren't worth the same effort as more critical information. The next is avoidance. Now, this just refers to prevention of release of some data entirely, like never giving out your social security number. Controls may be administrative, technical, physical, or procedural. Example, a procedural control may refer to changing your mindset prior to introducing critical information. Technical control would refer to locking down certain devices and processes. Your phone, the lock on your phone, that's a technical control. So transference of personal OSINT risk has a few options, not many. The number one method is to use a service like LifeLock to assist in identity fraud. However, I would really like to note that many of their functions you can do yourself, free. And finally, we can monitor the risks. I strongly recommend periodic reviews of your information so that you can react earlier rather than later. An example here, watch your credit reports. So, this audience is more aware than most on this one. So I'd like to ask you a question. In this country, about how many domestic violence victims are there every year? That number is this country alone. This is just within the United States. Over 12 million individuals are victims of domestic violence every year. This includes rape, physical violence, and stalking of intimate partners. The most shocking point of this one is that it doesn't include acts of violence by perpetrators who are unknown to the victim. Third parties total strangers targeting. This solely describes those abused by their intimate relationship partner or family member. And here's another sobering set of statistics. This reflects a percentage of women, we're focusing it in now, just women who experience some form of physical assault by at least one intimate partner within their lifetimes. And keep in mind, this does not include victimized men in any kind of relationship, nor does it uniquely identify assault on children. As you can see, there's a fairly shocking amount of domestic violence worldwide. Even the most positive statistic on this map still suggests at least 1 out of every 4 women are subjected to some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. So, what value does OSINT have to furthering domestic violence? It offers an abuser a wealth of knowledge about their target. This information increases the number of attack vectors to penetrate, influence, or completely subvert an individual's life. We must change our mindsets about freely offering data in exchange for free access to platforms. Give us your name and birth date and get in free. It's imperative that anyone vulnerable to domestic violence or who is attempting to escape it treats their information the same way as they'd treat their home. Would you leave your front door unlocked, open every day when you're leaving for work? As you'll see later in this briefing, there are almost countless sites to discover and exploit open source intelligence. So, smartphones. Everyone has one, right? This is one of the most common pieces of technology in modern society. It's also a target's worst enemy. We leak substantial amounts of information through these devices, most of it completely voluntary, willingly. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to the old days of a single 50-foot corded telephone in your home or using rotary dial here. But I'm making the point, survivors and potential targets should very seriously reconsider how they approach technology today and to develop a different mindset than your average user. One solution is to create that personal threat model. As I said, we'll discuss that later on. So, these statistics speak pretty well for themselves. I obviously can't list every resource, but this problem worsens every year. The last 25 years have seen a complete explosion of online information that's ripe for exploitation. Research by Varone shows that at least 80% of all actionable data comes from open source methods. 80%. What would happen to personal safety figures if we work to reduce that to 20%? All the information they can get about you, they could only pull 20% of it from open source. Might drop those violence figures a little bit, maybe. Usual resources for OSINT are photos and written data. Social media specifically provides 2 very major resources for anyone gathering OSINT. These 2 things can be far more revealing about the one posting them than most people know. Simple picture can tell a lot more. So, social media sites are obvious vectors for gathering OSINT. They are complete treasure troves of information. Most of this information we freely volunteer. Some people have taken the advice to lock down their Facebook profiles, delete it completely to prevent prying eyes. But we open our LinkedIn profiles to practically anyone of interest in hopes of getting a better job. Who's done that? I think all of us. So there's also considerable data available through personal aggregate sites such as Been Verified, one of my personal favorites, Spokeo, or any of the sites in this picture. I mean, this screenshot in particular is from the OSINT framework that's run by Justin Norden. It contains an incredible number of links to allow you to search for a specific selected target in areas like public records, metadata, social networks, and more. This is just one resource. Here is another OSINT resource. This one is maintained by iIntelligence. It's freely available online. Profiles. Now, target profiles are built through numerous resources like the sites I showed in the previous slides. A perpetrator can make a fairly reasonable inference based on information, or they can even verify breadcrumbs through duplicative multiple sources confirming one small bit of information. They can then put a stick pin in that data point and use it. We assist in this by cross-contaminating information across different platforms. So how many of you lock down Facebook profiles to prevent strangers from getting your information? Show of hands. Now, those that raise their hands, go back to LinkedIn. How much of your information is freely available on LinkedIn? That's the same expression I had when I realized the figures. And how many of you reuse the same account name on multiple sites? Accidental spillage. So we've all heard the idiom, picture is worth 1,000 words. In OSINT, pictures offer incredible intelligence value. The photo itself may reveal useful information, or an attacker might explore the metadata contained within the image file. Every photo you upload to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, text as someone, it has the potential of revealing useful intel. This is a screenshot of Sergeant Alexander Sotkin's Instagram page. And at the time, he was a soldier in the Russian Federation's army. There was considerable public confusion back in early 2014. The Ukraine was battling internal strife, and there was rumored harassment by Russian forces. The Ukraine military was battling with masked, well-equipped forces that bore no official markings or any flags by any standing nation. And these harassing forces were written off as little green men by the Russian spokesman, just to make things even more confusing. And they offer a fairly inconclusive answer about the allegiance of the invading forces. So why is this important? We give up information like this all the time on social media. Take a look here. He checked in. Victims may check into a specific place on Facebook. They offer an assailant very specific, actionable intelligence that's publicly available. Now, this example, it's still publicly debated if this was purposeful, intentional disinformation, but it has been included as a fairly useful example. This puts him inside, he's Russian, as I said, but it puts him at a location of where the little green men were. Now, background information. So nearly every photo has a subject, right? That subject is the focus of why you're snapping that picture. Picture of your child, nice landscape photo of Mount Everest, family barbecue, pool party. You're probably looking at the subject when you originally took the photo. But someone who's targeted you is going to look at the background for information as well. Is there a street sign in the background when you took a picture in your neighborhood? Does that street sign reveal the new location you moved to after you left an abuser? Is your house number visible with the style of house? So, background information in pictures. We decided last minute to replace the background information analysis. The set of photographs was entirely inappropriate. I'll give a general, vague description. A guy sent an unsolicited picture of himself to a young woman, which tells you pretty much everything you need to know. This is far too common an occurrence. But what isn't so common is that he sent it to someone who has forensic skills. In the background, she's able to expand it and enhance a pill bottle on the bathroom shelf behind him. This revealed significant information about him, like his current address, full name, including his middle name, birth date, medication details, his pickup pharmacy location. What's in the background of your innocuous photographs? Even a pill bottle. So on the metadata front, EXIF, it stands for Exchangeable Image File Format. The standard includes some metadata that's useful for the photographer, date, time, but that's also information that is extremely easily exploitable by an abuser. In addition to some social media platforms that allow user-selectable location tagging, like Twitter and Facebook, each image taken on a smartphone may include this information as well. If you've enabled location services on your phone, iPhone, Android, anything like that, you may have given up your photo application the permissions to automatically record your location as well. So, image analysis. I don't know how clear this is to y'all. So I'd like a little audience participation for this slide, if I may. So if you plot EXIF data from a couple of someone's photos on a map, what can you pull from this about them? Yeah, what information about, this is information pulled from someone's history. Yeah, location. What else can you pull? Yep.
They may work at that place, or they may use those bus stops.
They've recently visited some place called Vapormania twice. We don't know the dates on this because they're blacked out to protect the people who vape. We've got a general street area here. If you did have the dates, you could make a fair number of assumptions based on those. For instance, was that 2 visits since Friday? This person is a vapes and goes there a lot. Is it 2 visits since June? Okay, they probably don't hit it very much, but it might be near something they go to. They might have visited on specific days of the week, every Friday maybe. So taking it further, how else would you use this information? You know this person uses a vapor device. Could you use this knowledge to find them in a smoking area near their workplace? We usually, if we smoke or vape or anything like that, we usually hit places that are near work, route home. So it's a reasonable assumption that this store is near this person's home, their work, or some road they take on a regular basis. You can compile this information together with other tidbits to further reduce your search area. Even a partially redacted image like this one gives a wealth of information, just personal, exploitable information. If that interstate wasn't blacked out, you'd know the Vapormania off, call it 95. Quick Google will give you that. So I'm not going to discuss political positions in this briefing, but this one is a pretty great example of OSINT analysis. Shia LaBeouf, I've never been sure how to pronounce his name. Let's call it, thank you. Shia LaBeouf. He began a public protest not long after the last presidential election, and this picture is a still from a video he posted. So as you can see from the image, this is his attempt at displaying a flag online with the words, "He will not divide us." After talking about image analysis on earlier slides, you'll note there's not really a lot to work with here, right? Anything can you pull anything from this?
What about rough time of day? It was a camera feed, right?
Yeah, this is a still from an actual video he posted. He apparently posted a video clip. So yeah, rough time of day. Anything? Weather. So you know, wherever he put this up, when he posted it, it wasn't raining. Well, he did that video. Now, these techniques would make any CIA intelligence analyst blush. Anthony said so, I'm taking his word for it. The trolls of 4chan. 4chan. They scoured hours of video. Yes, there was a live video feed. They tracked individual flights in the background behind the flag. So using a little bit of trig, and they said in high school it wouldn't be useful. A little bit of trigonometry, public information, sites like FlightAware. They were able to use flight information to determine a general location in Tennessee. This was accidentally confirmed by Shia himself when he tweeted from a small town. That geolocation problem again. In the background of the tweeted picture, the trolls identified a specific restaurant, and they narrowed the search down to a 5-mile square area. And here's where it gets really unnerving. Because the camera also contained a microphone, they are able to use what's called fox hunt techniques to hone in further. Nearby forum users drove around the general area honking car horns, while others listened to that live feed online. They could see how far away it was, if they could hear the horns. They stole the flag in the middle of the night. So, why are these case studies important? They show why these are important examples. They show how much information we leak through accidental spillage. We don't even know we're giving out this information. Who thinks about flight paths in the background? I mean, who looks at landscaping or fountains? And this is why it's important to consider the necessity of publishing images online and to consider everything behind your subject. I'm fond of blank walls, but even those, what if I pick a brick wall and there's a bit of graffiti? So, now that we've had a bit of a glimpse of how bad it can be, let's look at what we can do to protect against it. Oh, we can. We've got the rope method. With your information, you can reduce it, obscure it, prevent it, or eliminate it. ROPE is just an easy acronym. Your mindset is more valuable than your actions. It doesn't matter how quickly you can wipe up the spilled egg, the dropped egg. It's still dropped and broken, and you're -1 egg, and it's all over the place. If that egg is information, doesn't matter how good your cleanup is, it's still out there. And as we know, the internet is forever, which means you have to consider the past, the present, and the future. The classic is, how is your next boss going to feel when they see this? How are your kids going to feel about this picture you posted? And now, personal threat modeling. This is a simple framework to develop a more personalized threat model. You ask 3 questions, you answer with a countermeasure, and then you repeat the process as needed. So let's go ahead and walk through each of these. So these are some of the assets that you'll want to prevent in the public domain. Most of these are self-explanatory, but I want to point out a couple that are fairly important to a personal threat model. So as I mentioned elsewhere in the presentation, smartphones are one of the most exploitable intelligence assets for an individual. What can you access on your smartphone? Email, social media, Facebook, Twitter, texts, everything. We not only willingly store and upload critical information with these smartphones, but we also unwittingly offer attack vectors for exploitation. Map histories. And of course, we had that little scandal relatively recently about Google still tracking your location even when it's off. An abuser targeting your smartphone directly isn't exactly open source intelligence, but it is still worth mentioning as a realistic attack vector. I know someone who left his phone out and the woman he was divorcing got into it. And the result was a fairly severe physical beating of him. Yeah, it was not a good case. So collateral or peripheral information is another important area. Gathering data about a target's family members and social circle allows an abuser to attack other assets to further their goals. You can control who's on your friends list. Who's on your friends' friends lists? Who has that one Facebook friend who accepts every request that comes in? Yes. Okay.
So I understand as far as like censoring or mitigating what information you put on your own social media,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being mindful of like certain settings. But what do you do about those like third-party agencies that, you know, for this $9.99 a month, right, will give you all of this information because it's public record, right? So like mortgages, loans, things of that nature.
That's the data aggregation sites, like the Been Verified that I mentioned. Those, you can actually go to those and remove your information. We'll get to that a little later. It varies per site. There are ways to mitigate.
We also have a presentation on that tomorrow morning.
Perfect.
Right, sorry, getting ahead of myself.
Well, everything ties in together. So gathering data about family members. Where was this person's mom? Oh, look, mom has pictures with the grandkids. Oh, look, mom has pictures of the grandkids every other weekend. But the parent of the grandkids isn't there, which means every other weekend, that's a clear shot that's not in front of the kids. Couldn't have found that from the target's Facebook, found it from their moms. Consider how many websites use your mother's maiden name or your father's middle name as a security question. Too many. And secondary data refers to useful information about other data. You can use a work address and a home address to reasonably forecast a daily route. Might be a little harder in this area because the fastest route can change with time of hour, but most places don't have traffic like ours. Most places, if you know they live here or in this general area and work over in this area, there's only one route. So here's those same categories and their potential threats. Gathering all the personal data could allow an abuser to impersonate you on social media. Or, if you are unlucky enough to have a stalker whose voice sounds like yours, on the phone. They can gain unauthorized access to email, your home computers, anything. Communication threats can further exploitation of other useful information. Someone grabs your phone and you've got message preview up. Or someone grabs your friend's phone and they've got message preview up. And you've texted your best friend, I'm leaving him Friday night. Spillage of location information in typical times gives an adversary options to randomly appear at vulnerable places, your workplace, your favorite bar. Who's going to pitch a fit at their workplace? That's what abusers count on. Nobody wants to make a scene. Some of us would, yes, but a lot of us have workplaces that will just as soon fire you as have to deal with any of that garbage, because that's what they consider it. Corporations don't like more paperwork. It's important you develop as many applicable threats for later analysis of vulnerabilities and likelihood as you can. Think of anything and then you rank them. This one's a pie chart. Someone had put it together, ranking threats by probability. Most likely threat here was social media. That was going to be where someone going after them would get most of their information. But there was also a lot of information about this person on search engines. Data aggregators, like the public record searches, that's another large chunk, but you'll see that it's smaller than the search engines and the social media. And then public records, honestly, I consider public records almost as a subset of data aggregators, but they provide things like who you bought your house from, where you live now, which bank gave you the loan, and for how much. But those can be harder to get to. A lot of times public records, you have to know which courthouse to go to. Has anyone here ever done genealogy? You know the value of a courthouse and public records there. Genealogy is just skip tracing with all the data static. Nobody moves around, so all the data is already there. You can track where your ancestors were, who had a twin brother who died, anything. Take that and use it in real life. But not everyone in the room raised their hands for the genealogy. Public record threat is not as widely used. It's also a lot more work than most people want to deal with, and it involves courthouses. So now you're looking at your personal threat model. What is most important here? It's just another way to visualize the 3 questions that we used within a personal threat model. So not every asset is worth protecting. Not every asset is equally critical. That is a key thing to recognize. As you walk through each of these factors, it's important it helps you if you rank them in order. What is the most useful piece of information? Your travel plans. What is the least useful? The month and year of your birth. Another example, your social security number, along with your name, probably more important asset for US citizens than a birth date. It's also important to recognize that not all threats are equal, and that varies from person to person. What is a threat to you may not be a threat to him. What is a threat to me may not be a threat to her.
I'm sorry. I got questions all day. So I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked the last presenter.
All right.
Perhaps you can provide a little more insight for me.
Certainly.
So when you use your fingerprints
Mhm.
or your eyes to unlock your phone, where does that information go? Is somebody able to access that information? It's not like I can just call an 800 number and say no.
It is stored in your phone, in a file in your phone. Oh, okay. The question of if you use a face scan or a fingerprint to unlock your phone, where is that information, the scan of your face and the fingerprint stored? It is stored on your phone, in a file on your phone.
Doesn't go anywhere. Does it go anywhere?
That one is not my area of expertise. It may be sent somewhere, but I don't believe so. I believe it stays local to the device.
If I can address
Yes,
that.
please.
It is associated with, it does stay on the device, unless your device is compromised, it stayed there and associated with your
With the
password.
device only. Okay.
Further
Yes?
question. What happens if someone gets your phone, gets use of your phone with your fingerprint in it or your face scan, and then, I don't know, they hack the phone, right? Are they able to hack into their phone and get your information?
To actually pull your fingerprints from the phone?
Yeah, like pull your fingerprints, pull your irises, pull your.
That
face.
one, I wouldn't suspect that your average person could do it. But I'm giving no guarantees about what forensics can do. There have been some amazing advances.
I can address that one a little bit more later on after.
Okay.
Yeah. But now, going back to rope. How do you secure your information? How do you secure your assets online? Consider using the rope method we described. Reduce, obscure, prevent, and eliminate. You can reduce information online, birth dates, locations, that sort of thing. People usually add a lot of information on platforms like Facebook. You can obscure information spillage by considering the potential for cross-contamination of accounts. Another method is using unique IDs and passwords on every account you have. And this means not being Boba Fett 5 on Facebook, and on Twitter, you're Boba Fett 55. Don't do that. Many InfoSec researchers preach about using password managers to prevent you utilizing the same passwords on every account. They can be a very useful tool. Reusing the same login allows an attacker to tie blocks of information together into a robust profile. Prevent information leakage. This one's easy. Change your mind. Change your mindset. Is it really necessary to check in at a location on Facebook? What do you got here? Did you check in? And finally, you can eliminate OSINT by completely deleting your account information. I believe this was covered in the last presentation, actually. This works differently on every platform. I'm not going to go into it. Simply turning off an account leaves your information available through search engines. Google Cache, Wayback Machine is another one. Walk through an OSINT search on yourself. Employ the same mindset. Think of yourself as the person you're attacking and eliminate valuable intelligence. The best mindset to secure your information online is to think like an attacker. Work through it. Find your own vulnerabilities, mitigate them before someone exploits you. Now, any questions? Anything?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you stepping in.
Click through and
And Kat, I do want to appreciate what she did. She stepped in at the last moment. Anthony was scheduled to fly in from Texas, I believe, and speak at this convention. Utah. And at the last minute, there ended up being a change that he couldn't get out of, so Kat stepped in, used the same slides, and was happy to come and talk to you guys. So I really appreciate that, Kat. So I think it's a really important conversation to have and a really important discussion. I like some of the perspectives that she brought to the table. Number one, the Shia LaBeouf. Thank you. Okay, I've not once. Shia LaBeouf. That'll be the first time. I think that's a great example because that became kind of, I like to call it the world's biggest game of capture the flag, because after that flag was captured, he moved it. That was the second or third flag that he had up in the example you gave. The second one. He had another one up, and people found it first and removed it, and it became kind of a game to them at least. And so he moved it again, and it got found again. And he moved it. He ended up moving it to London on the top of a museum, surrounded by fences and barbed wire. They sent a drone. They flew a drone with scissors attached to it to try to cut the thing down. But so that really highlights, that's all, you could say that's all in good fun, but the amount of brain power that was applied to that is just incredible. The amount of time that people spent watching flight patterns and looking at wind direction and thinking about time of day and all this other stuff, it's an incredible force of nature that could be used for good or bad. Are domestic abusers just as dedicated? They can be, absolutely. That can be some of the most dedicated, motivated individuals you'll ever meet with a very, very singular focus. They want one thing, and that's to find the person that quote-unquote wronged them. And that might be the person they left behind. That might be the victim. That might be you. That might be the support system. That might be whoever the case may be, the person they feel is their enemy. They have nothing to do except for focus on that. So that's why that becomes such a dangerous adversary. That's why the the importance of understanding the open source information, as Kat was outlining, becomes so, so critical because you want to find it before they do. Because if you find it, then you can start to remove it. That's not just for you. That's, of course, a resource that the question might come to you, where someone says, hey, how do I get this information offline? And if we're not having the conversation, then that might not be information that you know. Or worst case, certainly not in this room, but I've seen it happen before where the individual guesses and tries to provide good information, well-meaning, but it's not necessarily as helpful, or in some cases actually harmful. Perfect case in point, we start talking about how you piece things together, what things mean, kind of building on what Kat had said, if I may. You still see this on some domestic violence type websites and some shelter websites and everything else, is where they'll say, well, you need to get out as quick as possible. We're talking about expediency, right? We keep talking about expediency. So the answer is, well, pack everything up, clothes and important documents, and have it in your closet so you can grab it and go. Well, the natural question is, what happens when the abuser finds that in the closet? They ask the question, and you don't want them to ask questions. So those little things where Kat was saying about you check your mindset, that's where we need to have a different mindset. We need to, as horrible as it is, we need to be thinking like the adversary. In some circles, you call it think like the wolf. You think like the person you're trying to prevent against or protect against. And say, what would this mean to me? So when you look at your own social media profile, I love the part about pictures and things like that. When you look at a picture, take any random picture you find on Facebook, on your own profile or anything else, what can you learn from it? Can you see your work badge in the picture? Do you all wear work badges in your environment? Can you see it? What happens if you can? What could you do if you could see a picture of the work badge? Should you print one up? Do they actually look at those? What happens if someone goes up to a scanner and says, oh, this thing is on the fritz again? Is someone going to let them in? Yeah. Someone will let them in sooner or later. You just have to know who to ask and stand there. So we start talking about that stuff. Kat, I'm really glad you brought up those topics. I'm really glad it's a conversation that we can have. At this point.